everybody, welcome back to Dollars and Cents, the show where we discuss the business of football with Andrew Brandt of the National Football Post. As always, Andrew, great to have you here. How are you, buddy?
Always a pleasure, Sid. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Now, big story coming from the CBA front in the last few days as owners inform the union they will pull the revenue-sharing model next year. Now, why would the small market owners agree to this? Or don't they need the money for competitive balance?
Well, theoretically they do. Here's the deal. The owners say that without a salary cap next year, there's no need for revenue sharing because, you're giving money to prop up the teams to spend on a level playing field with the other teams as per the salary cap. But as we've talked about, as we sit here today, there's no cap in the NFL in 2010. The CBA is going to expire after the year. As per the terms of the CBA, the last year of the CBA has no salary cap. And the owner's interpretation is if you have no cap, you have no supplemental revenue sharing, which is a plan they agreed to in 2006, which really props up some of the low revenue teams. 9 teams got funding last year for a total of a little over $100 million. Now the league says that's not going to happen. That's not going to be part of this thing. And the union says we see it differently. We see that revenue sharing should continue through 2010 and only end after the expiration of the CBA. So we got a little battle here. So the union files an appeal. There's a person at University of Pennsylvania where I teach called the special master, and he'll interpret this in a hearing whether the supplemental revenue sharing for the owners applies in 2010 or in 2011 or not at all. So we'll see where this goes, Sid. I think what we have here is another shot across the bow from the league towards the union as we continue to start this negotiating process. My sources say progress has been very slow. They are meeting, but progress is slow. So we got to see what happens here. We may be in the final month of salary cap football in the NFL.
Wow, that is wild. Hey, I want to ask you about a column you wrote about Jake Delhomme, the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. I think the conventional wisdom here, most people seem to think that John Fox is going to get fired in Carolina. Bill Cowher maybe takes that job, and maybe even Mark Whipple leaves the Miami Hurricanes and goes to Carolina with Cowher to become his offensive coordinator. What about Jake Delhomme and the story you wrote on nfpost.com?
Well, I wrote about Jake's contract, and it was April 23rd, and the Panthers went to Jake and did a 5-year extension, and I sort of went into the whole extension. Here's a guy in the last year of his deal. He had $6 million on the deal this year in 2009, and they could have let it expire. But what they did is they went to him and they did an extension. I guess they felt that they didn't want to let Jake Delhomme get to be a free agent in an uncapped year. They're worried about that. They had some cap issues, put a $17 million franchise tag on Julius Peppers. But I laid it out. What happens is they have 2 options. If they don't exercise the options, they still have guaranteed salaries. If they don't have the guaranteed salaries, they have something called a supersede. It's kind of technical, but the bottom line is this. $19 million in guarantees, actually $13 million to $19 million, depending on what options are exercised, over the next 3 years for Jake Delhomme. Now, he's been benched. Maybe he has a broken finger. Maybe it's an injury, but he is not playing now. And obviously it's a decision that, is a little bit questionable looking back at this time, but that's hindsight. So, they went into an uncapped year thinking that we're not going to let Delhomme get out in the market, and now they're on the hook for a significant amount of money over the next few years for a guy that right now is playing behind Matt Moore.
And playing awful football. I had the chance the other day, Andrew, to do my show live from Landshark Stadium on Monday. That was the day that Roger Goodell was here in South Florida, and he was speaking on the Pro Bowl and the Super Bowl being in Miami, and he made it pretty clear that the NFL is not looking to come back to Miami all that fast for a Super Bowl. Miami has held a record 10 Super Bowls here, and he talked about Landshark Stadium not being up to snuff. New stadiums in New York next year, and Indy and Arizona. Now, look, I've been to lots of stadiums across the country. I'm not saying Landshark is the nicest stadium, but with everything Miami has to offer for a Super Bowl week, I find it hard to believe the stadium is not nice enough to hold a Super Bowl. It sounded to me, Andrew, like Roger Goodell was trying to hold this community up for ransom to get more money or a new stadium. I find it hard to believe that the stadium is the reason why Miami, who's held a record 10 Super Bowls, is not the right place to hang out for a week leading up to a Super Bowl.
Well, it tends to be a tradition, not tradition, but the recent history of Super Bowls in the NFL has been awarded to stadiums that were built with some public funding almost as a reward to the area Next year is going to be Indianapolis, then Dallas. Of course, two new gleaming new stadiums in the NFL, Lucas Oil and Cowboys Stadium. We've seen the Super Bowl at Detroit. I remember going there in a snowstorm, but that was the new Ford Field, and that was the theoretical gift to the Detroit community to have that Super Bowl. Miami's been obviously a favorite location, as has New Orleans. But yeah, I think that they're looking for improvements, and maybe that improvements comes from public funding, and public funding is rewarded with these economic boosts from Super Bowls that we've seen. So yeah, I think probably that's a PR spin to sort of put out there that it's not quite what these new gleaming new stadiums like Lucas Oil, Cowboy Stadium, Ford Field, what they're like, and we'll see what happens with the Giants Stadium. But yeah, it sounds like there was a message sent there, as you said.
All right, Andrew, as always, thank you for all the tremendous insight. We'll see you again next week right here on Dollars and Cents. And, of course, reading all your great stuff each and every day. And it is great at nfpost.com and opensports.com. As always, Andrew, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sid. Good to be here as always.
You too, pal. Remember, you could also follow Andrew on Twitter. He's at AD Brandt and catch all of his great writing. And like I said, it is great. He's at nfpost.com. For my good friend Andrew Brandt, I'm Sid Rosenberg. Enjoy the football. We'll see you next time right here on Dollars and Cents.